Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to welcome our guest this evening, Elo Adepukoli, a seasoned legal practitioner, as he takes us through this theme, which is apt this evening, legal requirements for commercial transactions. Over to you, Elo Adepukoli.
Okay, thank you very much, Afam, my learned colleague. It's my pleasure to be here, and I hope that by the end of today we'll all learn together. And I know I have some other colleagues of mine who have joined. So when it's time for the question and answer session, I believe we would have a more robust discussion and engagement. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen because we have just barely 30 minutes. So this evening we're looking at basic legal requirements for commercial transactions, and sorry. So we're going to be looking at 9 items in the presentation. So we'll look at what commercial transactions are. We'll try to understand who are those that engage in commercial transactions. We'll discuss when to seek legal counsel for commercial transactions. We'll talk about record of mutual understanding, types of contracts, legal capacity to engage in commercial transactions, legal structures for businesses, periodic regulatory compliance matters, and approach to disputes arising from commercial transactions in a nutshell. So simply put, I would say commercial transactions entails the exchange and or provision of goods and services between 2 or more entities for benefit, either in cash or in kind, based on mutual understanding. You're not going to get this definition anywhere because I coined this myself. I try to bring it down to a very simple, understandable form. So you have all the elements of transactions right here. You're either offering a good or a service, and you are offering it to another party, not to yourself. You are going to get benefits either in cash or in kind. When I say kind, it could mean, for example, I don't have to take money to transact business with you. I can offer you a service and receive payment in form of land or in form of any other property. So that's benefit in kind. That's an example, and then there has to be mutual understanding of why we're transacting together, what we are transacting, and how much or what is going to be exchanged between both of us. So in a nutshell, that is a very simple definition of commercial transactions at the level of this meeting. So who are those that engage in commercial transactions? I would say the answer is everyone, every one of us. Every one of us. One thing we must realize is that we are all commercial entities as human beings, both in the physical, economic terms, and even in the spiritual terms. We're all commercial entities. If you remember the parable of the talents, every one of us has been given talents, and God expects us to put those talents to use and make returns. So God wants to also see returns at that level. But the physical and economic level right here on earth, we're all commercial entities. And the earlier we all begin to see ourselves in that format, the better. For example, the essence of going to school, learning a trade, is for us to be viable commercial entities, because human beings can be bankrupt. And when you are bankrupt, you are limited in what you can do, the opportunities you can take. When we ask God for blessings, we are asking God to bless us economically as entities. So as private individuals, you would realize that all of us transact one way or the other. And business and corporate organizations also, organized businesses and corporate organizations engage in commercial transactions. You could transact with me directly as Elo Adekukoli. You could transact with me under the name of my firm, Simon Cooper Partners, and those transactions will be valid and enforceable between both of us. So you have sole proprietors who register as business names. I'm sure some of you will be very familiar with business names. That's about the easiest and cheapest vehicle, commercial vehicle to register anywhere, not just in Nigeria, but anywhere in the world. You have partnerships. Partnerships usually register as business names also. You have your limited liability companies. You have cooperative societies. You have NGOs. You have charitable organizations and associations. You have religious organizations. Churches transact, businesses. Why do I say so? There's hardly any church that does not procure services. Even if we want to make it simple, the security men you have, at your church gate is a form of commercial transaction between the church and the security men or the security service provider. The cleaners that are engaged to clean a church, or it's a form of commercial transaction. What about NGOs? NGOs also, even though they are not-for-profit organizations, they also engage in various forms of transactions that require legal documentation and legal counsel. So when we say commercial transactions, it's not restricted to just strictly business organizations, profit-making organizations. Non-profit making organizations transact businesses. Estate associations transact businesses, even though they are not profit making, but they procure services. They procure services. So we need to have a broad approach to understanding what commercial transactions are all about. Because when we understand it from that broad perspective, we're able to take the steps that will secure our interests in whatever we plan to do. Because it's very unfortunate, when you go to courts, you will see churches in courts. People take churches to court, people take NGOs to court, people take cooperative societies to court. So it's not just limited companies and individuals that go to court. And why are they in court? Commercial transactions are broken down. So now, when are you supposed to seek legal counsel for commercial transaction? If you look at the funnel right there, it's trying to explain something. I don't know, I believe we can see my screen. So when you wait till there is a dispute, it is almost too late at that point. Unfortunately, the vast majority of Nigerians wait till there's a dispute situation or there's litigation pending or being threatened before they run to a lawyer. Because in the mind of most Nigerians, a lawyer is the man that wears wig and gown and goes to court. And that's very restrictive understanding of who a lawyer is what I think makes a lot of Nigerians not to seek legal counsel on time when they are getting into transactional relationships. So if you look at the funnel, a lot happens at the transaction advice stage. So at that point, a lot of transactions take place. The vast majority of transactions take place. So there you discuss with your lawyer to structure your business and how to, every single legal advice you need before you start. All the documentation that you need, the regulatory issues that you need to take care of, everything is taken care of at that point. Then you go in, you sign your documents, you sign your agreements, you get your permits, you start your businesses, and then you move on. So usually when people engage their lawyers at the beginning, they don't have troubles with the regulatory agencies. They don't end up with disputes. But a lot of lawyers wait, a lot of Nigerians wait till there's a dispute before they run to their lawyer. Some, they try at the regulatory stage at the middle because, okay, let me just restrict it to CAC. So They come to you, I want to register my business, you register the business, and that's the end. But that is not the end, as you would realize very soon, because for as long as that business is alive, you have ongoing regulatory compliance matters to take care of that your lawyer would advise you about. Otherwise, one day government will come after you, or one day you run into trouble and your business will crash. So you will realize that the base where you have disputes is the smallest. So for every dispute that goes to court, you probably have 1,000 or 1 million transactions that did not fail, that did not get to a dispute situation. So that is what we must understand. For every dispute, for every failed transaction, commercial transaction that ends up in a dispute, you probably have thousands or millions of transactions that have been midwifed by lawyers, or that's been midwifed by the contracting parties with or without their lawyers, that didn't get to a dispute scenario. So the most important, so that should tell us that a lot of people probably go into transactions without engaging their lawyers. Some are quietly bearing the pains and of the mistakes they made in the contracts that they signed, or the wrong steps that they took. And I pray that after today, that will not be our portion in Jesus' name. So you need to seek legal counsel before you enter into legal transactions to avoid certain things, to avoid illegal and void contracts. There are contracts that people sign. I see some contracts, I just laugh. There's no way in the world that they can enforce those contracts if it ends up in court. Between the parties, they may be fine. They're just swallowing in their ignorance, but they're actually doing what is illegal. The contract is illegal, from the very beginning. And it is only a lawyer that can advise you as to when a contract is illegal, when a business is illegal or void. And then you have unenforceable terms. People draft terms. Sometimes some people engage non-lawyers to draft terms. For them, it's just English. It's not English. It's not just English. Law is different from English. So they draft the terms based on their own layman's perspective. But those terms cannot be enforced. I've had to advise clients, on matters like that, and just tell them, look, calm down. This particular clause, cannot be enforced against you. Unfortunately, both parties signed. On the other hand, I've advised clients where had to look, you can't even enforce this contract against this other party. So you need to avoid these things by seeking legal counsel on time. Then you have lopsided terms that do not secure your interest. Some people just sign their lives away. They sign off their businesses. You have, especially, you find this in the creative industry. Musicians, actors and actresses, they just sign their lives away, when they're dealing with their record labels and so on. And there was a recent case, in the industry, movie industry. I don't know how many of you heard about the Oloture case. If that lady had signed a proper agreement with the producers of the movie that got the script, she won't be in a situation where she feels shortchanged economically, because that movie went international, made a lot of millions, and she got almost nothing because she didn't get a lawyer to probably advise her or help her draft the agreement. She just walked and thought that I've gotten a good deal, my story is going to make the movies and so on. So people cheat themselves when they don't get, their lawyers involved. And then you have poorly drafted terms, you read some of these terms, you can't understand they don't make meaning. Then there are some contracts that violate statutory laws. You cannot contract outside of the law. And it is only a lawyer that can advise you when you are going outside of the law. And then there are regulatory penalties for certain actions and inactions by businessmen and individuals. It is your lawyer that would advise you to avoid some of these penalties. But when you don't get your lawyer involved, you run into these, traps, and they can be very costly. So I would also advise you, get a lawyer instead of copying templates. I get a lot of, I get a lot of people just go online, they copy certain templates, they send to me. sometimes I get weak, because all transactions are different. All transactions are different. And we must know that. The same way that all human beings are different. God created man, but all of us are different. We all have different DNAs. We may look similar. The same way transactions will look similar, but they are all different. Even your regular deed of assignment or tenancy agreements that people copy all over the place. There are some people that I see what they carry around as deed of assignment, and I just know that, look, the day there is any dispute on this property, this person is gone, because that document is just a worthless piece of paper because they copy templates. So you can't be smarter than God, because even God got lawyers. If you look at your Bible, the scribes are lawyers. They're the ones with the knowledge of the law, with the drafting skills, and they're the ones that preserve the scriptures that we have today. And then Apostle Paul, when God was going to do the bulk of the New Testament, he got a lawyer. Paul was a lawyer, a fantastic one. And Jesus is our ultimate lawyer anyway, because even the Bible refers to him as our advocate. So you cannot be smarter than God. And what I've also realized is most of the successful businessmen you have around, you check them out, they don't joke with professional advice, whether it's from lawyers or accountants or auditors, they don't joke with their professionals. So we need to imbibe some of these skills. You hear people say, if you want to be rich, if you want to be, you have to think like the rich. That's one of the ways rich people think. They ensure that they carry their professional advisors along in whatever they do. So how do you record? Now we're going to go deeper into the basics of, the legal requirements when transacting businesses. And the first thing is your records. Your records. How do you tell what both of you agreed to do, the transaction you agreed upon? So oral contracts are valid, they're enforceable. But the issue is, if somebody denies or says, oh, I've forgotten what we discussed, what's your proof that this is what we agreed? So oral contracts are based on trust, like close relationships. They are immediate and in the short term. Now, you have examples like your open market. If you go to a jam market, for example, or Mile 2 or Mile 12, you have what goes on there. When you buy your pepper, your tomatoes, your yam, you are transacting business orally, because nothing is written. You don't sign agreements in the market. But there is offer, there's acceptance, there's intention to create legal relations. You have all the valid elements of contracts right there. When you drive into your gas station, your petrol station, they've displayed the price of the fuel that you're buying. You drive in, you accept the offer, you pay, they fill up your tank, you drive away. You have transacted business, full-scale contract. And then you have the unorganized independent transporters like Counsel. Yes, if you pay with your POS, that is written proof of the contract. But that POS is not, it doesn't state the exact amount of fuel that you buy. It just states how much you paid. But if anything happens, it can be one of the evidence you can present of that transaction, but it will not be conclusive. But one of the danger of oral contracts is the absence, in the absence of witnesses. If there's no witness to that contract, somebody can become mischievous and say, look, we never agreed to do this. And it happens a lot. And sometimes people are mischievous. You understand? No matter how high the trust is, sometimes human beings can be human beings. So your best option is always to go for written contracts if you are not in the situation whereby oral contracts, can apply. So your written contract is simply a written evidence of the mutual understanding you have, whether it's in hard copy or electronic copy. So your SMS, the trail of your SMS communication can be proof of written contracts, even though you don't put everything in one document, in a Microsoft Word document to print. But if you keep that record, if you are transacting business, somebody is offering you a service, or you are trying to buy a good, and you're communicating by SMS, it's always good to store those messages, because at the end of the day, the combination of all the message trails will form the written terms of the contract, even though you don't sign anything. The same thing applies to your WhatsApp, or even maybe your Facebook Messenger or your Instagram Messenger. As long as it is in writing, your email. A lot of Nigerians don't want to do email. Now, when you want to contract, when you are transacting business, try to reduce phone calls. Try as much as possible to reduce phone calls. Even if you discuss on phone, one of the tips I will give to you is that after the phone call, send a message either by WhatsApp, SMS, email, to capture, and summarize what was discussed. Because when you send that message, you have created a written record, and then don't joke with your receipts. Whenever you transact and you get receipts, I think I'm getting feedback. Is any? Okay, sorry. So whenever you transact business and you get receipts, don't just discard your receipts. Keep them, keep your confirmation notes. These are very important pieces of written contracts. And then what's the benefits, or what are the benefits of written contract? I will go a bit spiritual here, since this is a kind of a church program. The Bible says what is written is written. You can't deny it. God himself said we should remind him about his words and promises. And he said he will not break his covenant. The Bible, the entire Bible itself, is a contract between God and man. And God even went further in Hebrews 10:16 to say, look, I will write my covenant in your heart and in your mind. So God himself prefers to write his contract. And we're supposed to be made, man was made in the image and likeness of God. So it is in the nature of God to put things down in writing, so that there is no controversy as to what has been agreed. So if we, whether as believers or non-believers or whatever we believe in, as human beings generally, when we shy away from committing to writing, terms that we have agreed, we are just showing that we are falling short of the very nature of God himself. And then what about online transactions? Everything, people will say the devil is in the details. I'll say the angel is in the details. Read the terms and conditions. A lot of us are quick to sign off. Before you have a contract, all of us have contracts with Zoom. We are using Zoom app. We signed a contract with Zoom. All of us signed a contract with WhatsApp. Every social media handle you use, you signed a contract with them. Your Netflix, you signed a contract with Netflix. When you transact on Jumia and Konga, you sign contracts with them. Because before you sign out, they would ask you, do you accept the terms and conditions? And there's a little box where you tick. There's also a button that you can click to read the full terms. But most times, we are so quick, we don't have patience to go through the terms. And those are the terms that governs the entire relationship that you're going to have with those guys. If you are going to return the goods, if the goods are defective, everything has been provided in those terms and conditions that you and I may not have read or decided not to read because we are impatient. So even online transactions have written contracts to them. And then you have terms that can be implied into contracts, even though they are not written. Terms like confidentiality and non-disclosure obligations. There are certain contracts or contractual relationships. Even though you don't put it in the contract, there's that implied term that there are confidentiality obligations. For example, if you engage me as a lawyer, I'm not supposed to start disclosing the details of our transaction to third parties. Even though you don't put it in your contract of engagement with me, I'm under professional obligation not to disclose. The same thing applies to a doctor. You go to the hospital, you run tests, you are diagnosed for something. The doctor is not supposed to go and tell the whole world that this person came home, we discovered she has malaria. You know, so some of these things are implied, they can be implied, even though it's not written. Even if it gets to court, the court would imply those terms. But what parties do today is that they go further to prepare what we call non-disclosure agreements to state what can be disclosed, what cannot be disclosed, and the time frame of the entire obligation, you know. So let's quickly run through some types of contracts, because what is considered as basic for each contract or each transaction is a function of that type of transaction or the specifics of those transactions. So you have a species of contracts I would call collaboration, you know, contracts or agreements. You know, these are MOUs, your shareholders agreements, your joint venture agreements, your partnership agreements. These are documents that defines the relationship when you are going into a venture with another person. If you are doing it on your own as an individual or a sole proprietor, you don't need these types of agreements. But the moment you want to team up with another person, no matter how close that person is to you, please, I beg you, you must have, your lawyer should be able to advise you to have one of these agreements, because relationships can go wrong, and they do go wrong. So you have your loan contracts, usually from banks. You know, you have some money lenders, you know, informal money lenders. And because people are so desperate and they're looking for money badly, when they see somebody or a bank that wants to lend them money, they just jump into it, they sign off, they don't carry their lawyers along. You know, and you think that the bank is a take it, it's not a take it or leave it scenario. But the bankers know that most times Nigerians don't engage their lawyers. So whatever the bankers prepare and give to the customers are quick to sign off because they want the money. So they are looking at the money, they are looking at the millions. They are not thinking about all the things they are signing away and the problems they are getting into. Look, you can negotiate your loan contracts with your bank. When you receive the offer from your bank, take it to your lawyer. Have exchange, meaningful exchange with your bankers. Businessmen do it. I've seen businessmen who didn't do it and crashed from being billionaires to nothing because they left some terms and conditions that they should not have accepted from the beginning. If they got a lawyer, they won't sign those agreements and they will still have their money today. So then you have employment contracts. This is supposed to be one of the most popular contracts because almost majority of Nigerians are employees, whether formally or informally. You know, so your employment contracts, it requires a lot of statutory compliance issues from the employer: pension, remittance, national housing funds, insurance, annual paid leave, you know, payee. These are statutory requirements. You know, unfortunately, some employers, they employ people, they don't take care of some of these things. You know, usually if you have a staff strength of 5 staff and above, most the payee and pension remittance will apply, you know, to the employer. And then you have contracts for service. This is where you get most people because the bulk of the Nigerian economy is informal. You know, if you check the statistics. So who are those that are caught up in this particular species? You have professional consultants and skilled service providers. And this requires minimal or no statutory compliance issues by the employer. Because of the way Nigerian employers behave, this is where most of the transactions should be. Instead of employing people as full-time staff, give them contract for service so that you know that they are not your full employees, since you don't want to remit, you know, the statutory remittances. So when you have contract for service, it is the other party that would have the responsibility of making those statutory returns to FRS, to PENCOM, and the rest of them. And this is where you have all your skilled service providers, your plumber, your house help, you know, your driver, your security man, your lawyer, your doctor, your engineer, your music producer. You know, this is where you have everybody, your DJ, your designer, your web, this is where you have everybody, because this is like an independent contractor. Your engineers, your architects, your surveyors, they are all under, they come under this species. So, but a lot of Nigerians, they just pick their phone, they call the architect, they call the surveyor, they call the lawyer, they call the doctor. They don't put things in writing. And the truth of the matter is that when you are dealing with professionals and you don't have anything in writing, if things go wrong, it's difficult to even hold your professional to the standards of professional negligence. It's difficult sometimes. So it's better to have things in writing. Okay, then we'll go to sales contracts. A lot of people do property. You're selling land, whether you call it deed of assignment or whatever. It's a form of sales contract. All forms of tangible goods, your household items, your TV, your personal goods, office supplies, agri commodities. All these are, tangibles. You are selling something basically. And when you are preparing contracts like this, there are some terms that are standard that must be in those contracts. So you can have certain terms in a sales contract that you shouldn't have in your employment contract, for example. It's your lawyer that will advise you on that. And then you have your licensing and rights contracts, franchise. Some of these filling stations you see around, they are not owned by Wando. Oh, okay, Wando is no longer there. We have NU. I'm thinking, okay, Total, for example. Some of the Total filling stations you have around, they are not owned by Total. They are franchises. So the owners of those filling stations signed a franchise agreement with Total to use that brand, and there are terms attached to it. And you have different scenarios like that. You have, these are contracts where you can assign your rights, your licenses, your claims. For example, if somebody is owing me money, I can sign a contract with, if Mr. B is owing me money, I can sign a contract with Mr. C to say, okay, the money that Mr. B is owing me, I'm giving you the right to collect it. I've assigned my rights to Mr. C. So when you assign trademarks, you assign patents, your image rights, these are forms of licensing and rights agreements and contracts. Then you have subscription and enrollment contracts, your pay TV, DSTV. When you subscribe, you check again, you sign the agreement with DSTV if you pay attention to those terms and conditions that you tick. When you subscribe to your internet data, or your call credits, you have signed an agreement with Glo, with Airtel, with 9Mobile. When you go to a school or you put your child in a school, you fill certain forms that the school will give to you. You have signed a contract with that school to be a student, and there are terms and conditions that will regulate that relationship. The same thing applies to your subscription to health insurance, to life insurance, even your bank account. When you open your bank account, you are signing a contract with the bank. If you check the bank account opening form, there are terms and conditions written on that form. That is your contract with the bank regarding how that account will be operated. So if anything happens, it is those terms and conditions that would apply to how the issues will be handled. So, and then you can have your construction contract also. So those are some of the types of agreements. There are many more. There are diverse types of agreements. But the most important thing is that when you want to go into a particular business, just be open to your legal advisor to say, this is what I want to do. Describe it in your layman's language. Don't keep anything back. Your lawyer will know the type of agreements to prepare for you and the advice to give to you. So let's look at legal capacity to engage in commercial transactions, because some of us, we're dealing with people that don't have legal capacity to transact business. And when you do that, you cannot enforce the contract against them. You have entered voicemail. You have entered one chance. So the first thing is, okay, as a citizen of Nigeria, I can transact business in Nigeria. I can't go and transact business in Benin Republic as a Benin Republic citizen, for example. I must cross the border and I must meet certain requirements when I'm crossing the border before I can transact business. Or let me not even use Benin Republic, because we have ECOWAS protocol that allows inter-trade between West African countries. I can't just go to the US or the UK and begin to transact certain types of businesses because I'm not a citizen. So I must have some form of permits to be able to do some of those things. So when you are preparing processing your visa and all those things, some of those things, they give you some of these permits, when going through that process. And then you can register with CAC, the Corporate Affairs Commission. Usually, even foreign companies can hardly do business in Nigeria until they have a Nigerian subsidiary that is registered with CAC. But even if they're not going to register, there are certain conditions that they can meet, and CAC will give them waiver as foreign companies. But you cannot just enter into a country as a corporate entity and begin to do business. Is it legal? Number one, whoever is transacting business with you cannot enforce that contract against you, or vice versa. And number two, the government of that country will come after you. And then you have regulatory permits and licenses by specialized regulatory agencies. You have agencies like NAFDAC, like DPRO for those in oil and gas, like Securities and Exchange Commission for those in the capital market, like CBN for those that are doing bureau de change, forex and banks and so on, financial institutions. And there are several of them. So when you want to do a particular business transaction, and you let your lawyer know that, okay, these are the things I want to do, your lawyer will be able to tell you some of the regulatory permits that you need to get alongside your CAC registration. And then there are some businesses or commercial transactions you cannot do without having professional qualification. For example, lawyers, doctors, architects, engineers, surveyors, accountants. If you don't have some of these qualifications, you cannot do what they do. Otherwise, you run into trouble. Although, Nigerians would like to break law, would like to bend things. Today, you have a lot of estate agents who are doing what lawyers should do. I've had a scenario whereby an estate agent who was a friend was preparing and signing documents using my name. So you have things that go on. You have people who are not doctors, who are trying to, you have fake doctors, you have engineers, accountants, people preparing things that they should not prepare just because they want to make money. It's wrong. And then infants and children below 18 years. When you transact business with infants, just know that is a void contract. You have entered voicemail. If anything goes wrong and the infant misbehaves, you cannot hold him to that contract, except it is a contract for necessaries. And what are necessaries? Necessaries are things that are required for survival, like food. So if an infant comes to buy something at your shop, it comes to buy garri or beans or rice, it is enforceable. You can hold the infant, you understand, if he doesn't pay. But if it's for something else, it's not enforceable. And then usually when you want to register your company and the company is owned by an infant, that infant will need to get adults to join him or her. So because today you have a lot of young people that are below 18 that have business ideas. They want to do things, they want to transact business. And this is for you because this is a youth meeting. So if you are below 18, you need to know that there are certain boundaries when transacting business that you cannot go beyond, except you get an adult to team up with you. So what are the some of the legal structures for businesses? The legal structure you select could depend on several preferences, like maybe your clients or maybe you as the business owner, you want full control, or even though you are working with somebody, you want to have more control of the business. So if you tell your lawyer that you want that kind of control, your lawyer will know the kind of structure to advise you to adopt. Otherwise, you just start fighting with your partner and the business can collapse. Then flexibility in decision-making, tax efficiency, to minimize risk, to pull capital together. When you are going on your own, you are limited, but when you're working with somebody, you can easily pull funds together. So if you are going to do these things, there are structures that are best adopted, statutory requirements also. There are some businesses that you want to do. There are some things that you want, for example, if you want to play in the oil and gas sector, you can't go in form of a business name. You have to be a registered limited liability company, for example, because that is what the law requires for businesses like that. And then let me just run through some of the structures. For example, I mentioned that all of us as individuals, we're all economic entities. So as Elo Adekukoli, for example, I can be trading and doing business as Elo Adekukoli, and it is completely legal. You can be trading business as Mr. A or Mr. B in your personal name. You have flexibility to do what you want, to take the decisions you want, to work when you want. This is where people say they're entrepreneurs. It's a winner takes all. If I make money in this business, I take everything. If I lose, I suffer the loss alone. And then the business dies with the owner and lives with the owner. So it's difficult to transfer it because you're just doing it by yourself. There are a lot of people that are comfortable just doing it this way, and they are fine, and there's no problem with it. And most Nigerians actually operate on this scale. And even when they set up their companies, they don't drop this mentality because they team up with people. You see somebody, you have a company, you have many shareholders, you have several shareholders, you have joint venture partners, but you still want to, be calling all the shots. It is that mentality of going it all alone, which I think is a cultural thing that Nigerians developed over time. So this is where a lot of Nigerians operate from. And then you have the registered sole proprietor, under a different name. So instead of transacting business as Mr. A or Elo Adekukoli, I can decide to find one beautiful name, you understand, and register that name at CAC and be transacting business in that name. But it is still the same as transacting as an individual. The liabilities and everything, the advantages and disadvantages are the same. The only difference is that since you have registered at CAC, you must file reports every year. Otherwise, you will have penalties to deal with. And then you have your partnership. When you enter into partnership, you need to be careful who you are going into partnership with, because in a partnership, the liability of your partner becomes your own liability. You are not the one that has done wrong, but your partner has done wrong. The victim of your partner can come after you, in simple terms. And when it is registered, it is usually registered as a business name. And once you register at CAC, it's also subject to reports, periodic reports. You have your joint venture where 2 or more entities collaborate together, and then you have your limited liability companies. Now, with a limited liability companies, the business can succeed you. When you leave this world, other people can continue with it. The other shareholders can continue. You can transfer the shares, and then the liability and the risk is separate from the owner. So if I have a company, or if you have a company, if that company enters into business transaction and runs into trouble, you can't be coming after me. Go and sue my company. You understand? For a lot of Nigerians, instead of taking the proper steps against the company they transacted with, they take the people behind the company, the managing directors or the person that they know. They start taking the person to police station and all that. That's wrong. That's not right. You understand? You're just making that person suffer for nothing. You think that you are trying to claim your rights. You're actually, in fact, it's a sin. Let me even look at it from a spiritual perspective, because you are making that person to suffer outside of the law, because it's unlawful what you're doing. And then you have your limited liability partnership. This is new in Nigeria under the recent Companies and Allied Matters Act that has just been passed. But the liability of the partners is similar to what you have, in the limited liability company. Is limited to their equity contribution, but it has the features of partnership. So the tax liability is personal income tax, not corporate income tax. So let's look at periodic regulatory compliance issues, because the moment you start business or you register your business, for the lifetime of that business, there are certain regulatory compliance matters that you must take care of every year or every month or every quarter. Otherwise, you will pile up fines, you will pile up penalties. One day government can come after you. and you would have a lot of debts to pay to government. You know, there are a lot of penalties. So once you register your business, whether limited liability company or your business name or whatever at CAC, your annual returns, you have to do these things. You have to keep your statutory books, prepare your financial statements, your resolutions, your charges and debenture loans, your AGMs. These are things that your lawyer would advise you. That is why even at CAC would ask for your company secretary. You're supposed to have a company secretary when you have a limited liability company, and that company secretary should be a lawyer advisably. You know, even though, yes, you can appoint maybe an accountant, but a lawyer is your best bet so that you can be advised on all the compliance issues. Even as a private individual, you can have a lawyer on a retainership basis whenever you need to take care of issues like this, you know, and then your FRS and LRS, your tax people, you have to comply with income tax, either personal income tax or corporate income tax. Your VAT, you have to make your VAT returns every month. You know, your stamp duties, if you prepare documents that need to be stamped, you have to do that. Your capital gains tax, you know, so your lawyer and your tax consultants will advise you on the compliance issues that you need to take care of, because there are several penalties that are attached to non-compliance. And let me tell you, once you open your bank account, just know that FRS and LRS, they are seeing whatever you are doing. EFCC is seeing what you are doing. So they see transactions going, you know, to and fro. One day they just send you a notice that we notice that you're making so and so amount of money. We're not seeing your tax returns. So we have decided to assess you, and this is how much you should come and pay. So when you wait for them to assess you like that, it's even more difficult, because it's difficult to change their assessment. You start begin to, you know, you begin to exchange correspondence, you begin to beg, you begin to argue. Sometimes they even take you to court. But if you get a lawyer to advise you, your tax, you know, consultants, they advise you to take care of some of these things. And these are things that you do yearly, as long as you're in business. And then you have your PENCOM and group life insurance. This is for employers that have more than 5 staff. You know, your national housing fund. Then you have NITDA, data protection. If you keep the data of people, like phone numbers, email, you know, address, like when you are transacting online, Jumia will ask you for your address. They will ask for your card details. They will ask for your email. They will ask for your phone number. They are vesting your data. And they can give that data to somebody else to use, both for profit-making purpose or for issues that can compromise your security. So there's a new regulation at NITDA called the National Data Protection Regulation that requires that entities that take data of people, personal data of people, must make annual returns and make reports on how they use the data. So these are compliance issues. Even churches, even religious organizations, NGOs, estate associations that keep the data of people, they are supposed to be making these, you know, reports to NITDA. They are supposed to do these audits. Then you have compliance requirements by, so just to say that if you take data of your customers, you should start thinking about NITDA also, you know, and how to get lawyers that can help you make those returns so that tomorrow you don't get into trouble with the regulator. Then you have compliance requirements by specialized regulatory agencies. For example, if you are doing things that is regulated by CBN, there are certain things you must file at CBN periodically. Same with SEC and DPR and several, you know, regulatory agencies. But based on the transactions or the business that you are doing, your lawyer will be able to advise you on the requirements and the specialized agencies that you need to comply with. So last but not the least, how do you approach disputes arising from commercial transactions? The most important thing, and my advice to all of us, is to stick to the dispute resolution clause in the agreement that you signed. If you didn't sign an agreement, please go to court. If you have an oral agreement, go to court. But what a lot of people do is that they take commercial matters to the police. And that is wrong, because even the Supreme Court, the courts have decided several times that, look, this is wrong and it's punishable. So when you go to court like that, the court will punish you. If you take a matter that is commercial and civil to the police. And what will happen is that by what I noticed, the few times I've gone to bail people at the police station, the person that goes to the police to report, he ends up spending a lot of money. So you are spending even more money that you are trying to save, thinking that maybe your lawyer will be more expensive. Because those policemen, until you give them what they want, or if they may not release you. And let's not deceive ourselves. I've not seen any bail in Nigeria that is free. But on a practical level, if you go to the police station, you would realize that you that went to the police station, you will spend money. So it's not wise on that level. Number two, we have human rights abuse issues that we're dealing with. We have fantastic policemen, but we also have policemen that are not helping the reputation of the force. So imagine if you take a commercial matter to the police and they abuse the person, they maltreat the person comes out with a broken limb, the person comes out with only one eye, or the person could die in cell. You are called people for murder. Even though the courts in the land do not hold you culpable, God will hold you culpable, because the matter you took to the police does not warrant such action, and you have directly or indirectly caused more pain than you should have caused, instead of going through the right channel. So as Christians, I would advise that we take the right step instead of using unnecessary use of force and instigating, state authorities against business partners that you could have resolved by arbitration or in a civil court proceeding. So that would be my advice, and I think I can stop here. I guess I've overshot my time. We can take questions.